Haason Reddick is pissed off. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Closky at eClosky WTSP. We are your credential members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. And you can find me on this show 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Evan is going to give us some of his predictions for the schedule coming up a little bit later, but there were some interesting comments made on Tuesday as the defensive and special teams coaches spoke with the media. And Evan, I want to start things off with linebackers coach Larry Foote and some of the things that he said. And I'm going to start with his comments about Haason Reddick, the new edge rusher for the Buccaneers. And Foote said Reddick is, quote, pissed off, and we like that, end quote. The Bucs certainly had some luck getting a free agent that was, well, I mean, he was pissed off. He woke up feeling a little dangerous, but he wasn't appreciated by his former team. Of course, I'm talking about Baker Mayfield. Is this a situation now where the Bucs might see Reddick as being able to kind of catch lightning in a bottle twice in 3 years by getting these guys that are leaving a disgruntled situation?
Remains to be seen, right? And certainly the Bucs hope so. The Bucs are thinking that they're going to get the best version of Haason Reddick, but until we see it happen, these are all just words. So that's not to say that I don't believe in Haason Reddick. I think that it was a great pickup, and it's risk-free in the sense that you're only in it for 1 year, and if things don't work out, you can always back out of it, yada, yada, yada. But I would love to see him on the field, and I don't know if we're going to really have a good assessment of what Reddick is going to bring to this defense until we get into training camp and we're able to kind of see how he flows with the rest of the defense. But certainly getting after the quarterback is a big deal. Getting after the quarterback with 4, we know, is a huge deal. So to hear him talk about Reddick that way, and also just kind of the relationship that they've had, going back to Arizona, and how Larry Foote joked that he can kind of coach him the old way, that sort of the way that things were done maybe back in Larry's day of how coaches would get on him. You can't really do that with the kids these days. So he says that there's a little bit of an old school coach-player relationship there. And it's good for the other players in that room to kind of see how they all gel. As you got to remember, Larry Foote is moving to his, a different position. I mean, from what he's done previously, he's going back to something that he did previously. So it's also a more familiar spot, a more comfortable spot for Foote as well.
Well, and something else that Foote mentioned was that if SirVocea Dennis is healthy, then their linebacker room is, quote unquote, definitely better than it was last year. To me, it's still the weakest group on the defensive side of the ball. I talked about it. I did a mailbag last week where a lot of people were still concerned about the linebacker room, and you can look at the depth, you can look at what they've done. They didn't address it in the draft. You and I talked a lot about Jahad Campbell and Demetrius Knight and Bosa and all these different linebackers, but it wasn't a position that they addressed. But should Bucs fans kind of be giving Foote the benefit of the doubt here and buying what he's selling by saying, SirVocea is a big part of what we want to do, and he does have the potential to finally be healthy after dealing with injury for the first couple of years of his career, and that alone makes this room better than what we saw last season.
Well, Larry Foote was asked if he thinks that this room, the inside linebacker room, is better than what we had last year. And he said, well, that remains to be seen. But if Dennis is healthy, I would say yes. So it goes back to what you and I were talking, in that you're putting a lot of eggs into the SirVocea Dennis basket. And while I'm a big fan of his, while the returns on games 1, 2, and 3, especially that Lions tape, if you go back to last season and watch how he performed against Detroit, while all of that is impressive, I still am fearful that there is a little bit of too much, I don't want to say pressure or maybe reliance, just too much into the unknown. Like, we had similar discussions about KJ Britt last year. We're like, right. Oh, man, did you see KJ Britt in that playoff game against Detroit and the way that he kind of took Devin White's job, and he really looks like he's somebody who can emerge and such a great leader and all these things, and it all sounded great. And then we watched it play out, and it was like, oh, boy, this is not what we thought it was going to be. And that's not to say that SirVocea Dennis, is the same exact skill set as KJ Britt. He's not. That's not to say that it's going to be the same exact situation. I'm just saying that we don't know enough about SirVocea Dennis, and if he can make it through an entire year, because for a large chunk of his career, he's been injured. So there is concern there, and you kind of, the bigger question is really, which we don't really know based on the interviews we got, but Anthony Walker, what is he going to be like? Is that really the diamond in the rough here of being in that depth that we're not giving enough credit? I think that is a really important piece in this conversation. And just like, I think I remember people after the draft were kind of telling me, hey, the Bucs' success next season is going to be dependent on Chris Braswell improving, which, people talked about Braswell's coaches talked about Braswell as well in the Tuesday press conferences. But my rebuttal always to that is I disagree. It's Reddick. Reddick is going to dictate whether this team succeeds or not. Like, if you're going into the season saying, oh, is Braswell going to be the linchpin to it all, that's a problem. But you don't have that because you got Reddick. Inside linebacker, as much as, if you can tell me today both guys would be healthy, I'd be stoked about it. But I'm still concerned. And this is a coach, defensively speaking, who got eviscerated in the middle of the field last season. So it's been a concern. And moving from my concerns where typically I complain about the edge, I have moved up inside linebacker above edge entering next season. So that just shows you where I'm at, because this has been a 2-year thing for me.
Indeed it has. And like I mentioned on my mailbag episode, it's like, yeah, I view linebacker as the weakest position group on the defense, but that doesn't mean that they can't be good.
It doesn't mean that they're weak, right? It means that they're the weakest.
Yeah. And if your weakest position group is still good, then you're sitting pretty. Evan had a chance to catch up with Bruce Arians. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. The Indiana Pacers have made it to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second year in a row, but it's the Oklahoma City Thunder that are still the overwhelming favorites to win the title at minus 140, followed by the New York Knicks at plus 490, the Minnesota Timberwolves at plus 600, then the Indiana Pacers at plus 700. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll have crossovers coming up with both Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino this year because the Bucs take on the Dolphins and they take on the Bills. We'll talk more about the schedule coming up in a little bit. But Evan, you and I were texting Tuesday morning, working out our schedule for this, and you were like, hey, I am going to an Arians Family Foundation event. Got to talk with Bruce for a little while. What's going on with BA and everything over there between him and the Bucs organization? But, what were some of your big takeaways from that?
Well, first off, it's always great to see Bruce. He's enjoying retirement, definitely not returning anytime soon. He's still golfing, which is great, and continues to give back to our community along with, many other communities that he's coached in. So he is, going to always be a part of Tampa Bay, Hillsborough, Pinellas County, and making sure that he continues to raise money through the Arians Family Foundation. So that is the good stuff. Also good stuff was the amount of support there for Bruce. A lot of former players who played under him, ran it to Jamel, Mike Evans, Vita Vea, Levante David. Of course, we always see Rondé. Rondé and Bruce have such a special relationship. But, I think it's Tyreek Funderburk. There was a lot of guys, the coaching staff, Bowles. So there were a lot of people out there in support of the event. I think that's why we had also we saw some of the guys. We got some video. Mike Evans actually during voluntary OTA stuff out there today because, he's able to double dip, go support Bruce, also get to catch up with Baker and all them and make sure that he's in rhythm before he goes back and, continues to train in Texas as he kind of shares that offseason home there. But, yeah, I think that also I was able to talk with Bruce, and I asked him about Josh Grizzard and just what it's like to call plays for the first time. And he says that, Todd does such a great job and really making sure that you have those unscripted call-it periods because it's not just so much about what plays are you going to call, but you have to also find that rhythm of, okay, I want to go to this or I'm going to do that, or this is who's going to, especially those preseason games, this is who's in my ear. This is where I don't want you in my ear, right? There's a whole cadence and the ability to get those reps. So, he certainly says that you learn as you go, right? The more reps you get, the better you get. But ultimately, he's not too worried about that, and he just continues to feel that the Buccaneers Foundation in the building and who he speaks to, that none of that has wavered since he's left. And certainly he was more prevalent in the building in 2022 than what he's been the past couple of seasons. But certainly he has a good beat on things. And obviously I mentioned him and, his relationship with Rondé, but he's also got a really special relationship with Todd. And he continues to be impressed with what Todd can do, especially considering the injuries the defense has had. And he said that he doesn't know if enough people in the outside world have given Todd credit for not having this team absolutely collapse when they've been, pretty much stripped to the studs based on some injuries that have happened. Certainly last year, certainly 3 seasons ago. So, somewhere in the middle there, they were actually okay. But those are just kind of the big takeaways from Bruce.
Well, speaking of Grizzard here, this is the second time in 3 years that the Bucs have had an offensive coordinator that hasn't called plays previously. So taking a look at what worked so well last year and what they need to work well this year, and this is strictly your opinion right now because we don't have an answer, but having worked under Cohen last year, do you think Grizzard kind of adopts the strategy working with Baker of giving him multiple plays at a time and putting him in a situation where he could check in and out and make sure that, they kind of have that same flow that they had last year that made them a top 5 offense in the NFL?
Yeah, I have a tough time believing they're not going to be multiple in that sense of making sure that you give Baker many answers to what the defense is going to present. You got to remember, Baker was a big advocate for Josh, right, in that philosophy, and Baker's a big fan of that philosophy. He was a fan of Dave Canales, but he has said in the past that during Dave's system, he would walk up to the line of scrimmage and he would kind of know, And what Liam was able to do is at least provide him some outs and some ways that, the players can take ownership of the offense. I'm going to line you up in a handful of plays and give you some things to think about. But for the most part, you're going to decide when you see out there what works and what doesn't. So I imagine Josh is going to be a part of that. I think that I also think he will adopt some things that maybe Mike McDaniel used to do, still does with Miami, considering he spent so much time with him. And that's all going to go into a cauldron between Liam and Mike, and that will be the development of Josh Grizzard's offense. So he's really smart. From everything we've heard, he is in that building, working his tail off. He is trying to make the most of this opportunity. So preparation's not going to be a problem for Josh Grizzard. Intelligence, knowing what the defense is going to try to do, film study, not going to be an issue for Josh Grizzard. It's going to come down to the call-up periods and making sure that when you're thrust into those moments, you can react quickly. So that's what it will come down to, and that remains to be seen. So at this time last year, we didn't know much about Liam Cohen, but Liam Cohen did have at least a handful of experiences calling plays at Kentucky. So there was a similar cadence there. It's just, is it going to work at the NFL level? Josh still needs that foundational experience. So to get that now, and to hear someone like Jason Light talk about recently how he believes he made the right decision with him making that high, with him taking that job, that should speak volumes as well to fans out there that the building is very happy with him. And as of right now, I'm pretty confident in Josh, and I don't see this offense taking a step back. He's got a souped up car, man. This is a pretty sexy situation to be in for calling plays for the first time, and you really just a lot of it you don't have to overthink.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's like, just don't screw it up. You have weapons on weapons on weapons. We used our first round pick to get you another weapon. Just don't mess it up, man.
Yep.
All the defensive coaches, special teams coaches, they all spoke. Real quick, you had Charlie Strong, you had Nick Rapone, you had a lot of different guys making different comments. What was your other, outside of the Reddick stuff from Foote, what was your other biggest takeaway from these defensive coaches today?
Well, George Edwards is really going to be bouncing around now. He's not going to be specifically in one group, but he is kind of Todd's right-hand man now that Casey Rogers is gone. And they're going to find out where he's needed the most. But during OTAs, Todd's able to bounce around and certainly provide some focus on the offense where they need it a little bit. And in doing so, I just thought it was interesting to hear what Edwards had to say about doing what was needed for Todd and taking some things off of his plate so he can handle some other things within the building. And Charlie Strong evidently is the mayor because he knows everybody. And he called Todd Bowles when the job opened up and said he wanted it. And, he after becoming the head coach at USF, he never left Tampa. So he said that he's been here multiple years, multiple times, has always kind of gone to practices, same at Florida. And he's comfortable here. So he's just really excited to be a part of it. So that and the standard stuff of, look, this group knows that 7 interceptions was not acceptable. They want takeaways, all that stuff. And I thought the funniest soundbite was from Larry Foote, who said, look, if you get a sack, your head coach is going to hug you. You get a strip sack, your head coach is going to hug and kiss you. So I think that was my favorite.
That is fantastic. All right, Evan brings back the crystal ball. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs. And all right, the schedule gets released later today as people are listening to and watching this. So let's have you get out the old crystal ball. We need to name the crystal ball. We need to give it an actual name and just refer to it as that name from here on out.
How about crystal ball?
No, it needs a
ball crystal.
We're gonna name it. I don't know.
Crystal's ball. It's not my ball. It's not your ball. It's Crystal's.
We can talk about it.
Okay,
via text later on. Let's have you make some schedule predictions. And I made mine on yesterday's show. For anyone who didn't catch that, you're interested, go back, check it out. But Evan, you don't have to do what I did, and that is predict the schedule week by week. But I do want you to start with the first thing that everyone is going to look for when the schedule drops, and that is how many primetime games, who are they playing, when are the Bucs going to be nationally televised? So let's start with how many primetime games you think this team ends up with.
Well, I want to say that Pat Donovan of WDAE said that he heard from a birdie that the Bucs will be the night game in LA for Thanksgiving, which has been a long time for the Bucs to play on Thanksgiving.
They're 0-1. It's not a good memory.
No, but certainly with Baker returning to LA, that creates some good storylines. So let's pencil them in there. The team will get a Thursday night football game, and I'm sure that will be against a divisional opponent. Last year it was against the Falcons. Maybe this time around you're talking. I think the Falcons again works, by the way, since those are kind of the favorites in the NFC South. I don't know if they want to do it back-to-back years of it, but that makes sense to me again. But maybe the Thursday night football game is home for the Buccaneers versus on the road, which I think it's been recently. I remember them having a day in Buffalo on a Thursday. Last year they were Thursday. Was that back-to-back years? They're due for a Thursday night home game, I believe. And then they're going to get another one. I would love to say that the Lions game would be one, considering those meetings. That smells like a Sunday night football game to me. It's on the road again in Detroit. So you got, 3? And let me do I feel like they got to get more than 3. The Eagles have their whole schedule has been announced right now. So I have a tough time believing that the Eagles are going to be a primetime game when 4 of them I feel like have already been announced, and it hasn't been the Bucs. But I'll go with Man, I'll go with another Sunday night football game, and I'll say Niners at Bucks. So I'll go 4. Those are my 4 picks. Not like in love with that. I like technically I think the Bills would be a fun Monday night game. Bucks at Bills Monday night. I'm going to change it to that. Okay, they get 1 home primetime game, 3 on the road primetimes. Done. 4. Staying with that. Bills, Rams, Falcons, and what was the other one I missed?
Lions.
Thank you.
See, now mine, I counted the Rams because I talked about Pat and him talking about that Thanksgiving night game. I counted that as their Thursday night. So then I had
that's right, yeah.
I had Bucks Bills for Sunday night, and then I had Eagles and Lions as Monday night games. So those were my 4. I jotted yours down. I have mine down. I'll talk about which one of us is closer on the live episode tomorrow night, because once again, I will be going live on YouTube after the schedule release, react to all of it, maybe do a week-by-week prediction. But another thing that I did on my prediction show was trying to figure out who the opponent is going to be for the Creamsicle game. Now, the NFL has said that the teams can wear their throwbacks for more than 1 game. I don't personally think the Bucs will. I think because they make it such a production for the entire area, for the entire week leading up to that game, I think 1 Creamsicle game, and then we're going to get a couple of extra pewter uniform games, which they need to make up for the fact that they didn't do it last year. But taking a look at the home opponents, who do you look at on the schedule and you go, yeah, that's the one. That's the Creamsicle game.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the Patriots. I think that one makes a lot of sense. These Creamsicle uniforms have been associated with losing, not just recently, but forever. And yeah, I think you really want to plan for the Creamsicles against an opponent where you're a bit more optimistic, because it really is starting to become negative energy. I mean, I know that we are going to do it leading up to the Creamsicle game. Hey, they haven't won in these jerseys in X amount of years. It's been, X amount of losses in a row. Here's their record. It stinks. So I think that you got to try to set them up for success in that way. I would imagine Bucks Patriots would be a 1:00 game. If you want to do it against the Jets, which could be a 1:00 as well, I think that's something that it also can be thrown out there. But I am in agreement with you. I think it's time, they did it against the Lions, and that made sense historically, but that's a really tough game. Last year, you did it against a division foe, and I think all division games are really tough. So to me, that's where I see it.
Yeah, and I wish that the Patriots could wear their throwbacks in the same game, because you're talking about 2 of the most elite throwback uniforms in the NFL. And if they could both wear them, that would be amazing. Unfortunately, that won't happen. But one of the other things that I mentioned with that Creamsicle throwback was that I thought that's when they induct Tom Brady into the Ring of Honor. Both of his former teams are in the house. He's already gone in the Patriots Hall of Fame or Ring of Honor, whatever they call it. That would be the perfect time. You have a Ring of Honor prediction for player, or do you think maybe they won't do one at all? What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think that my odds would say maybe they don't do one. I'm not 100%. Like, Tom Brady is for sure going into the Ring of Honor. We know that. When I'm not 100% sure on, typically you like to wait for something like that when you need it. Think about a season where you're not projected to do as well. You want to probably use Tom Brady's retirement to make sure that everyone shows up that day during some lean years. So you can push that down the road. But if the Buccaneers feel like they can get some added eyeballs, and along with Fox, make sure that they can create some sort of coverage plan here that really gets them to enjoy it, and you can give Tom this whole week celebration, then you do it. But to me, That's a lot of production, and that's a lot of like investment into Tom, and he deserves that day. Let me get that straight. He deserves that day. But I think this team that has legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, I think that I wouldn't want to kind of have a week like that be somewhere in the ether. Like, I just think it's a lot. I think it's a lot. It's a lot of distraction. It's a whole production. Like, it's not going to be just we throw them out there at midfield one day and, oh, cool, and we're done with it, right? It's going to be a whole week thing. Interviews and all the 9 yards. So I don't know. And especially for a game where you probably should win it. Like, I want the least amount of distractions there. So to me, again, my first choice is kind of like no Ring of Honor member this year. Second, we need Simeon in there, man. We need Simeon. Simeon and Gerald McCoy are kind of like a couple of those names that are I think are percolating. And but yeah, that's what I'll kind of go with for now.
I'm still on the James Wilder train. It's long.
And 1,000%. Yep. I mean, he, if you're looking for kind of like somebody who absolutely deserves it, but if you're looking for one of those like, hey, let's get one done and it's not going to really have this whole production value, right? We can do it, honor him, and kind of move on in silence a little bit. That's a guy to get done this year, in my opinion.
All right. Well, Evan, what do we have going on over on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app?
Yeah, cannot wait to see the schedule come out. Just make sure you watch 10 Tampa Bay Plus. We have our new show, the Ultimate Florida Sports Show, with my friend Chris Porter there in Jacksonville every week. We kind of do the week that was, just some of the biggest topics, and we discuss them. Some long form, others we put a minute on the clock, but we just kind of, you get to see our personalities a little bit more and have us talk about all the Florida sports and have us talk about even some national topics. So that's a fun show. Would love for you to engage on that. And you can always hit me up at Closky WTSP on the X. And I love interacting with you there as well.
All right. Yep. Make sure you're checking all of that stuff out. Following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at Closky WTSP. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, because then you'll know when I go live after the schedule release. And of course, you can follow wherever you get your podcasts and become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.